All right, friends, welcome to another episode of Passion, Purpose, Profit. I have an interview that I'm really excited about today. Christy Bridges is the CEO of Sawtooth Group. She's a marketing whiz and guru, and she also has really cool glasses. I looked through her Instagram. She's a connoisseur of really cool, fun glasses. So if you're not watching this episode, you might want to tip over to Spotify or YouTube and make sure that you can watch it. But Kristi, thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to have you on. You told me right before this is only the second time you've been interviewed, because I know you have a pretty popular podcast. So I'm excited to ask you some questions about your journey. So I want to jump right in with your biggest personal or professional challenge. What's something that you've overcome in your life and that you feel like has helped you and supported you as an entrepreneur on your journey?
I guess that's an interesting question because there's so many challenges, as you know, being an entrepreneur. The biggest challenge for me in my entire journey has been just getting out of my head and into the world, right? Not overthinking things and not overthinking how I show up or how I talk to people. So I have had a terrible, I started my career with a fear of presenting that was not acceptable because I was creative by background. So I would be standing up in front of the room presenting to people and I would be dying inside. Like my brain would be talking to me and saying, that sounds stupid. And then my mouth would stop talking and then people would be staring and literally it was so terrible that I wanted to stop presenting. And I had the CEO of the company before me. He would come to the meetings and he would just sit there for support for me because he felt the same way. And I always knew if he was there, that I could look at him and someone would be smiling at me. And that really affected me in a lot of ways. And so I took a lot of presentation classes and it took me probably 10 to 15 years to stop doing the thing where I was talking and my head was saying other things to me. It took me forever. So that was a giant hurdle, which affected everything I did because when I bought the agency, all of a sudden I was the out front person all the time. It wasn't just in a meeting I was getting prepared for. It was me selling, me talking, me doing all the things that I wrote down when I was starting in the business as things I would never do. Never sell, never be the person who's responsible for new business, never be the person who's responsible for growth. And I do all of those things every day now. So I had no choice but to get good at it and get at least not super uncomfortable with it.
I love that. We got to pause on the mindset shift or the change because that's an area that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I think success all starts between our ears, and I will die on that hill. But I'm curious, like, was there a tool, a mentor? What was kind of the thing that helped you flip that switch? Where, I mean, obviously the voice is always there, but you kind of were able to either overcome it or compartmentalize it, or just become the force that you are, leading people now.
I think it was a lot. I think it was all of those things. Like I had tools, right? I had classes, I had trainers, I had coaches, and I think coaching is huge. I mean, coaching is a big part of my life too. So I agree with you. Everything happens between your ears and that's what affects everything that you do. And I went through a bunch of business programs. I went to a couple of Tony Robbins programs who I happen to respond really positively to. I mean, I think a lot of the programs are similar in content. Sure. And it's who gets you excited and gets you out of your comfort zone. And for me, that was him. And so I did a bunch of business mastery programs. And you're doing things that are totally psychotic that you would never do. You're touching people you would never touch, and you're screaming at the top of your lungs and all the things that seem absurd, and they are, except for that they actually have an impact on how you show up. And so coaching was really important to me. I have 3 coaching certifications of my own because there were times in my career where I thought this wasn't going to be it for me anymore. Before I bought the agency, I decided I was going to quit advertising and marketing in general because I was so unhappy and so uninspired that I went and started taking coaching certifications thinking that was going to be my next path. And in that process, I learned so much about myself, which I'm sure you know because you do this. And I decided that what I really wanted to do was turn this business that I was in around and keep it for myself. And
perfect pivot. So I'm so curious because I exited a corporate career, and a lot of the people and the entrepreneurs I talk to, it's like they burn out the mechanism on the thing that they were doing. And then it was like, right-hand turn, complete career shift and change. And that's cool, right? But it's like yours is such a cool story because you actually really loved what you were doing and you want to kind of level up within it. So I'm curious, like, what had you like thinking maybe exit? And then what was the moment where you kind of reversed and came back and decided, and you could tell the story of how you know, bought out your company, which I would love.
I think there were a lot of things happening at the time. The agency was struggling, as most agencies that were independent were. My CEO, who is a wonderful human being, was clearly on his way out. Like, he was older and I knew he didn't want to stay there, but also the business wasn't where he wanted it to be to get some outside buyer to come in. And so I was like, okay, the writing's on the wall here. This agency is going to not be here at some point in the next 5 years. Something's going to have to shift here. And I was pretty frustrated with what was going on internally there. And so I decided I was going to make a shift. And in the process of doing that, I realized that all the things I didn't like about what I was doing were still going to be true if I became a coach. I was still going to have to go find clients. I was still going to have to put myself out there. I was still going to have to do all those things. And I really like the business. I mean, my dad was in advertising. I started visiting agencies with him when I was 10 years old. And so I would bump into writers and art directors and people that were doing really cool things. And I remember very clearly meeting a woman when I was in 6th grade, which is a long time ago. Her name was Carol Ann Fine, and she had an agency and she was a partner. And I was like, wow, a lady partner. Isn't this, because everyone I met with my dad were men, except for this woman. And she was a copywriter turned agency partner. And she asked me for writing samples, and I wrote in a little book and I gave them to her. And she was like, you are going to be a fantastic copywriter. And literally decision made for me probably when I was 12. Wow. That's what I do with my life. And I had a lot of bumps in the road, but I did start full-time as a copywriter before I graduated college, and did not graduate college, by the way, after that, because I was working and I was really happy doing it. So anyway, that is a long way to say that the coaching just opened my eyes to what was bugging me. And it wasn't the stuff I had to do. It was just the way that agency was at the moment, and the fact that there was no leader and there was no vision. And so I decided to try that instead, and quickly realized that he was going to go and I was going to have to do something. I was either going to buy it or I was going to go work for someone else. And at that point, even though I had been working for him, I really wasn't working for anyone. I was kind of bringing the ideas to him and saying, could we learn this? Could we try this? And so I didn't want to go work for anyone else. So I just tried to figure out how to buy the agency, and I did. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like most entrepreneurs that I talk to now on my podcast, I just closed my eyes and jumped, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And guess what? Sometimes it was fantastic, and sometimes it was terrible. Terrible.
I love what you said about, you know, kind of the coaching made you sort of discover that there was elements or things, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but like there were things that were maybe uncomfortable that you sort of quote unquote didn't want to do, right? That you had to sort of lean into, right? And then weren't going to go away just because you pivoted or changed careers. Yeah. And I often think about that because in my journey, like there was a lot of things early on I didn't want to do. And even now in like year 7, 8-ish, right? Like I'm getting to the point where I'm getting to like delegate pretty regularly things that I don't want to do, and really refining down to the creative side and the front facing side. But I think there's a chapter where like you kind of have to do some of the things that you don't want to do. Like this idea of being in perpetual flow state and just, oh, I just get to do fun stuff all the time. It's like
not realistic.
It wasn't built that way. You know what I mean?
Grow, I think it's realistic if you want to stay where you are until the world changes, because the world will change for you if you don't anyway, right? So you could decide not to, like, I wanted growth. I wanted to be part of something big. I wanted to be part of something important. So there was always going to be those challenges for me. I was always going to have to put myself out there and take leaps. And so what I thought I was going to avoid by leaving wasn't going to be true. And I'm glad I realized it, because I do like the business. But, you know, I bought the company 2 years before COVID, and we were already on a decline. And we were having to leave our office space because our lease was up. So we decided to build space in a new building that we had been looking at for a long time. And so I had, in addition to the challenges of owning a business and being a creative first, so not having any business training except for the few seminars that I went to and classes that I took on my own, I also moved into our space in the end of October, right before COVID. It was already too expensive because it took 2 years to build out. So from the time we decided to do it to the time we moved into it, things had changed, not in a positive direction. We moved into the space. It was too big for us, but I thought we could grow it. And then COVID happened, and then we couldn't even go there. And it was, I cannot tell you how terrifying it was. And I'm an optimist. Like, I'm an optimist. And I would wake up every day and be like, you could do it. It's going to work out. We're just going to get through this little bit of time. How long can this possibly go on? And you know how long it went on. It went on for what seemed like forever. And eventually we had to give up the space. I had to move people to 4 days a week for about 6 months so that I could pay payroll. And I had to rethink what I was doing, because what we were doing before didn't even exist in the world anymore. We were a small agency working with giant clients. And every time a contract came up for renewal, we didn't get it because we were way too small for the way the world had been going with these big clients. And so I had a decision to make. And I decided at the time that I was going to focus on emerging brands in the health and wellness space as far as outreach goes, because that's what I'm really passionate about. That's what my certifications are in. But that meant that I was going to focus on people who were early stage, emerging, scaling. They didn't have any money. And then when COVID happened, nobody had any money. So those small clients that I had started building relationships with and founders, they couldn't spend anymore. And so that was the really, really scary time for me. And that's when I started my own podcast for a lot of reasons. One is I was stressed. I didn't know what to do with my energy. I found myself thinking about bad things like doom, like what's going to happen to this agency? What's my next thing going to be? And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to live there. So I decided to start a podcast so I can meet more people, but also because I saw this need for this platform from a health and wellness community perspective, especially in the CPG world. There were so many brands that all of a sudden had no funding that, and before that, I don't know if you're familiar with the CPG industry, but check writing was just like easy peasy. You want to fund for a new water brand? I'll write you a check, right? And then all of a sudden the faucet shut off. So I started the podcast. I started meeting people, and I'm telling you about the podcast, not because of the podcast itself, but because of what it let me do. So I have this podcast called The Irresistible Factor. I have founders and investors and all kinds of people in the emerging space category. And every time I interviewed someone, which was much easier than I thought, by the way, I thought it was going to be hard to get guests. That wasn't hard. New business, hard. Getting guests on a podcast, easy. And every time I interviewed someone, I realized why agencies had such a bad rap. I understood all the things that needed to happen for a business to be successful that had nothing to do with spending media dollars on Meta, on other platforms, on Pinterest, on TV. It had to do with building business and learning skills and managing cash flow and
infrastructure.
So infrastructure, exactly. Managing founder energy, figuring out what to do when the founder started to scale and there were other forces at work that would take away the thing that they were really good at. And so every time, I think I've had 250 episodes or something of my podcast, wow. I learned something every time. And I truly believe that as a marketer, I am better than many people who are in this space because I have a deeper understanding of what founders are going through and what it actually takes to build a business beyond, or actually before you get to the part where you get to spend money on marketing. And so that has been epic for me from a business development perspective, because I've learned how to help people raise capital. I've helped people exit. And when you're preparing a business for that, it's not the same as just growth at any cost. So I think that for me has been a really big gift that I didn't even know I was getting until probably 6 months, maybe 8 months into the podcast. I was like, wow, I know a lot of things that I didn't know before, and I didn't learn them in school, and I didn't learn them by reading. I learned them by listening to people who are actually in the situations.
I love that so much. Yeah, I think for me, book learning, like I struggled in school early on. I struggled to get into a decent college. I mean, I got my act together when I was in college because it kind of felt like the last sort of, it was the final countdown, but it was like, yeah, that wasn't the mechanism by which I learned. I was an experiential learner. I was a learner by being hands-on, but also by communicating and talking to people. And when I became a yoga teacher, I could feel the channeling of all the classes that I had taken, right, starting to come out. And I was like, oh, this is my zone of genius, right? Is to be able to replicate, what other people have said or taught or I've felt in my body. And I love so much, like so many things of what you said, but I think for me, the thing that really sticks out is like, human connection, it's like really getting people connected and dialed in where they need to go. And for me, this podcast was that. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to talk to founders. I wanted to hear not just even health and wellness, but like different stories of challenge and how they kind of, for you, it was like you had the purpose and then you kind of had to reinvigorate the passion. And then once you married those two together, then the profit like showed itself. But so many of us, especially founders, like we struggle in silence. We feel isolated. We feel like nobody kind of gets it. I'm one of those people too. I have the credit card bills to prove it. Meta ads and advertising spend that just went nowhere. And I had people selling me the, bill of goods, like, oh, I have the answer to all your prayers and stuff. And then once I kind of recognized that I needed to build, like, you said, infrastructure systems, like really have that higher level view, and somebody who actually got me and my values as a person. And it's only been in the last 2 months. Like we haven't even worked together a full 2 months, but something has clicked and pivoted. And I think part of it is because of this podcast. Like I've been getting more clear in these conversations of like, what do I need and what do I want to build and what do I want to scale and, things like that too. So I love that. I think there's so much value in kind of what you shared. So take me to like kind of what was the moment or maybe the decision or thing that you did that rescued a sinking company facing COVID to growing it to now where it's something that is a bit of a powerhouse in the industry, right?
God, I think there are no single things that happened that made the transition. And I don't even know.
Or was it just you and your mindset and your like ability to stay positive?
I think it's both, because there were days, as we all have, where I was just, not days. Every time I looked at a cash flow, every month at the end of the month when I looked at cash flow, I was like, God, Jesus, how am I going to do this? How am I getting from here to the end of the year? And right. And sometimes I had a 3-month runway and sometimes I had a 6-month runway, but I never had a year runway. I could never see that clearly. And so I was constantly spiraling in my mind, and it affected me physically as well. And then I would do all my coaching tricks, right? And it would be okay for a little while. And then I started to notice, so that now this has been going on for 9 years. That's when I bought the agency, which my controller just told me about 3 months ago. I said, when did I get this agency? Like 6-7 years ago? And she's like, no, it's actually been 9 years. And I was like, 9 years. So for 9 years, for 8 of those, I thought I was going to go out of business every 3 months.
Wow.
And then I was like, but you thought that
makes me feel so much better, by the way.
So how many months is that? That's 24 times, right? Isn't that at least 24 times a year that I thought I was going to go, or 24 times over the course of my career as a founder or an owner, whatever, that I thought I was convinced. And then it didn't happen. So guess what? I have evidence. I have evidence to the contrary. And so my brain just needed to start to focus on that evidence instead of the thing that our brains tend to do, which is spiral into all.
This is literally one of my favorite exercises that I do with people. I literally have them script out self-limiting beliefs, come up with the antithesis, and then just like shopping for a car, start to find all the examples, find all the red cars in your life, right? Like find all the examples of it, right? Not being true. Because that's all your brain is. It's just a difference engine, right? It's just trying to come up with, the answer to the thing. But if you just give it a direction and you point it somewhere and then you affirm it and repeat it, right? It's like, it is so powerful. It's like, it is the most powerful thing I think we can do, especially as far as kind of knocking out those like self-limiting beliefs. And I so appreciate, your willingness to share like how deep that despair gets, because it does. Like,
interesting thing, because I don't think I felt that way. Like I felt that way. I was scared and nervous, but I never felt that way deeply. Like I've 100% believe in myself and my ability. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a really good marketer. I'm really good at helping brands figure out who they are and staying there, right? Instead of the thing that we tend to do, which is go wild as soon as we start to get a little evidence that things are growing, then we start to scatter, and brands scatter and founders scatter their energy and their time. And it shows up with the consumer. So I know I'm good at my job. I just needed to remind myself on a regular basis that the evidence is pointing the opposite way that I'm making it feel like it is, right? And all of this stuff was happening in my body. None of it was happening out loud. I would never have said a word of this to anybody out loud because I didn't want anyone to think I was weak or think I didn't know what I was doing. I had imposter syndrome like we all do, especially at the beginning. But it's not, none of it's true. I'm here, I'm growing. I have had helped at least 3 brands with giant exits and a couple with big investments and a couple decide not to do an exit. And so I've had a lot of success in the category, and that's what I need to keep reminding myself of. And I tell the same thing to founders when I interview them on my podcast. You're still here. Every day is a new day. And they all bump into this. We all do it. Everyone who owns a business, I think, has the same thoughts from time to time. And it's just how you decide to stack up the evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've gone through it with retreats where, at first maybe 6, 7 people show up, and then you get it to 10 or 15, or I've had 20, 25 person retreats, and you're like, this is amazing, right? And then things get slower, like COVID happens, right? And now you're just trying to get one person to say yes to your thing, right? And it's like, but you have to go back and remember, like, no, you can do this, right? Like there's evidence of this to be true. And I think, yeah, for me, very similarly, like it's always shown itself if I had the faith and the trust in it. But man, it's so easy to get lost in the sauce of your own mind and to just, and just to doubt it. And I think if you're not, at least somewhat pushed or somewhat like nervous, then you're not enough on the edge to grow and scale. Yeah.
I agree, because that takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of, right. I don't think you could be a sleepy founder or and in this
complacent too, like you won't enjoy it, like you'll get.
That's important, but also it's really hard to grow when you're not pushing. It just is. This is not an easy industry anymore by any stretch of the imagination. It changes every 30 seconds. We're dealing with AI now, and I happen to love it, but I also think that it's a challenge because a lot of people don't use it properly. And so things are starting to all feel the same, and which I think is an opportunity for good agencies and good marketers to say, okay, I know how to use this to do the thing you need to do, not use it to save you money, because that's what people are doing with AI right now from a marketing perspective. I want to do it faster, I want to do it cheaper, but really you could do it better if you use it properly. And so
we just tried to do a whole website rebuild with it, and then we ended up having to scrap it and go back to square one because it wasn't feeling right, and there was functionality that wasn't hitting. And so it's like, I think it's like anything else, right? I think it's a tool, and then also I think in a world where we are like about to hit a tsunami of just like AI content, and just like there is still such a need for this, right? Like for human interaction and connection. And so I think you can use it as a tool, but I think you also have to have a human element, and you have to like have an intuitive part of it too. You can't just ask it to run your life. And
I was going to say that to you too. It's not just the human element, but it's the intuition. Like there is an intuition that I have developed over time that people who don't know marketing don't have because it's not developed. It's not they don't have it, they haven't developed it. And if you have that, and then you combine it with whatever you do on AI, whether it's research or iteration, then the tool becomes incredibly valuable. Then the tool could act like an employee, right? You could tell it things and you could give it tasks, and it could, but I've also found that the more you do it, the more lost in it you can become, and you can't even get back to the thing that you started with. And that's the part that I think is really tricky. And so I think it's a really good tool, and it will help people accelerate what they need to do, but it isn't going to replace the human intuition part and the experience and the what happens in the real world and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm on this crusade right now of kind of going scorched earth with a lot of like actually diverging from a lot of technology. So like I stopped wearing a Whoop. I stopped tracking like calories on an app. I stopped tracking workouts like through, my phone. And I'm like on this crusade to get less than 2 hours of screen time in a day, which I didn't really know how hard it was going to be until I actually got really real about how much I was on them. But in so doing that, I started to see and find patterns in other people having the same struggle and the same issue. And it's like, boom, right? Like there's the thing, right? That I'm like searching or wanting to teach or help or support people. And sure enough, the thing I'm struggling with, right, is what so many other people are as well. But I can't learn that through asking ChatGPT. I have to learn it through my own experience, right? And then be having conversations out in the wild, right? Which part of the reason I'm having those conversations is like, I've been going to the gym and leaving my phone in the car. So no music, no nothing. There's like this term, like people will like be on a plane and they won't do anything and they call it raw docking their flight. Have you seen that?
It's amazing.
So I'm like trying to do that with life now. I'm like, how many things can I do? Can I go to the bathroom without it? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I start like literally taking...
Isn't that crazy? So I have a little story on that.
It is crazy. I mean, it is, but it isn't also too, because we've been indoctrinated.
I know, conditioned.
Yeah.
I went to a play on Friday night with a friend of mine. And it was local theater, but it was fantastic. And it was Carole King musical and it was so fun. But anyway, we got in and we went through the metal detectors and she said, oh no, I don't have my phone. I think I left it in the car. And the show was 3 hours. And I was like, oh God, well, let's go back to the car right now. And she said, well, I don't think I need it. And I said, okay, wow, I'm impressed because I don't know if I would sit here for 3 hours without my phone willingly. And she's like, well, I'm not going to get it. And so we went in and we had a drink. And then she was standing there and she kept looking around and she was so uncomfortable. And I said, you want your phone, don't you? And she said, I need to get my phone. And I said, all right, let's go. So we went back and got the phone and she did not touch it, by the way, for the entire time that we were there. But she could, like, it was just a thing. And I could feel it coming off of her and I would have felt the same way. And we had to go back to the car, which wasn't far, and get the phone just to have it with her.
It's a thing, man. I know too, I will say like, in my journey when I was early in retreats and I was like, okay, what's a naming convention that I can use as a non-famous person without even a clear idea? Like I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a meditation, but like, what is my retreat? And then it just like came to me in a meditation one day. It was like digital detox. Like people need that, you need that, etc. And sure enough, I named it. And then people were coming from all across the country to an unknown person's like retreat, right? So I knew that I had sort of struck a chord and I've done all these other things, but then fundamentally, right, it still comes back to this idea that if we can find more presence, if we can find more time to be without, then that intuitive part of us, which AI cannot replace, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, like, you know, as a founder too, like there is something about, like you said, you have that history, you have that skill of being able to know in the moment, right, what the moment needs and what decision needs to be made. And it doesn't come from up here. It is a visceral body intuitive thing that is, I would say for me, the best decisions I ever made come from that. And I imagine you would kind of echo that back for founders that are listening or people on this journey.
Yes. And also I would add to that, it has given me the ability to help other people. Like, for example, I had a client that I'm working with and they're really early. They have a great opportunity ahead of them, but they need money to do it. And the founder is kind of on her own to some degree. And she hired us and then panicked because she was like, wait, I don't know what the heck, I can't do this. This isn't right. I can't commit to this. And then tried to unhire us within 4 days. And I called her and I said, she sent me an email and I said, okay, in my head, I was like, interesting. What's she going through right now? Instead of just saying, oh my God, I was like, what's she going through right now? And so I sent her a text and said, let's just talk for 2 minutes. Whatever decision you come to, I am completely fine with. I talked to her on the phone and I said, I just want you to know that what is happening happens to all of us and it will pass. And she was like, I don't know. And I said, think about it and feel how you feel, but I'm telling you, I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to support you no matter what you decide, but give yourself a minute to breathe. You're doing too many things at the same time. You don't have any support. So let's just pause this conversation and we can talk next week. This happened on a Saturday, by the way. And we'll figure out what to do from there. No pressure. And there really wasn't any pressure. I meant all the things I said, but AI couldn't have told her that, right? She needed to hear it from a human being. And guess what? On Monday, something good happened and something came through that she wasn't expecting. And she texted me and said, I'm so glad we talked. And I just want you to know that it is all going to work out. And I'm not saying that because I did anything great. I just talked to her because of the experiences that I've had and kind of talked her off a little bit of a ledge. And then the rest of it just happened naturally. But I don't think that could happen if you didn't have experience and you didn't speak to people like people.
Yeah. Well, even that advice, right? To like unplug it and leave it for a minute and come back to it, which I always like tell this story of like when I worked in TV, we had all these moving parts, right? We had cameras, we had graphic systems, we had all these things happening. And if things crashed, you needed like really high level IT people. And sometimes like you need multiple because there's all these systems talking to each other, et cetera. But I always found it funny that no matter what the issue was, right? And no matter how high up you went up the IT chain, what was the first thing that they did?
Restart your computer.
Turn it off, leave it for 30 seconds. You have to leave it for 30 seconds, right? There's something even in technology where it's like you just gotta freaking leave it for 30 seconds, plug it back in, and then start over, right? So if she had asked that same question, right, to ChatGPT, which it's constantly trying to get you faster answers, right? More servers, more speed, right? The advice would have been, well, here's all your strategies, and here's what you do if you do this, and here's what, and it would have just taken her further down that rabbit hole, right? So it's like this constant inundation of information and answers and wanting to know, right, the outcome. Like if you had done that, right, when you were, counting your runway months, right? Like you might have had a completely different outcome than if you just took time, rewired yourself from the inside out, press pause, and then like, let's tackle this from a higher state of being or a higher state of consciousness, right? Which is something that, I mean, this is again, the thing that I like advocate for people. It's like, it's not so much in the what you're doing, it's like what you're not doing. And are you creating spaciousness for yourself to actually be intuitive and to make decisions from a place of safety rather than from, fear? It's like the idea of, you either decide from fear or love, you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't really do both, So I've always kind of loved that thinking and that analogy. So what's kind of the state of the union for you right now? Like, what does business look like? How are things going? And what's kind of maybe some of your aspirations of like your build, your scale, I don't know, like, well, what does the future look like for Kristi?
It's interesting that you ask that because I'm not at an inflection point. I mean, I could keep going like this for a long time and I feel good. We're growing. Things are headed in the right direction. I see further than 3 months out now, which is amazing. But it's still a different kind of business than it used to be. Like when I bought the agency, I would say 80% of our clients were retainers. And that's wonderful, right? When you have something that is going to be recurring, amazing. And now the balance has definitely shifted. So it's probably 50%, maybe 60. And so it's just a constant, like to me, it's just knowing that to grow, I have to do the work. Like it's not going to happen without the work being done. And I don't know what my timeline is. I don't know. I haven't decided. I mean, at some point I'm going to want to exit, right? At some point, I don't know what that means.
I'm going to ask you, because you said you like have done the Tony Robbins, like he often advocates for people to build a business like they're going to sell it. So I'm just curious if like that has been in your mind or if you resonate with that or.
That's funny that you said that because I hear a lot of people when I interview founders on my podcast, many people, especially right before COVID, were building to sell and sell really fast. I feel the opposite. I think you should build a business as if you want to keep it.
And I like that. I'm so glad you said that because like for me, my business is me. Like it's me working with people and interacting with people. And I would love to be 80 and coaching and going on retreats and traveling and all that kind of stuff. So I love him and I love the intent of what he's saying, build infrastructure, have it be, almost to the point where anybody could do it. But I like that softens that a little bit for me. So I appreciate that.
I see it that way. Like I would like to get a little bit more comfortable letting other people do some of the things that I do. So that's a goal for me for sure. But I want to build it like I want to keep it because it's important to me. And I think that my clients know that it's important to me. I really care about them. I really want them to be successful. I am not in the business of selling you media so that you can spend more money and then cross your fingers that you get results. That's not what I want to do. I want to see it. And that's why I actually love the emerging and scaling business space because I get to have an impact on people's business for real that they can see.
Their lives.
And their lives. And when they get to $100 million and they want to go find a big agency because they feel like that's what they need, although I would argue that you might not, go. That's fine because guess what I don't want to do? I don't want to get lost in the red tape of a big company where I can't have an impact anymore and 75 people need to weigh in and nobody really has a point of view or a vision anymore. I love founder energy. I
You're
love
like, yeah, I was gonna say you're like constantly in like the early dating phase, you know, where it's like all hot and heavy and fun and like you're super into each other and like
I don't think I would say that because it's still so stressful for founders and there's so much pressure on them in general.
Dating is very stressful, you know, when you're like, you know, trying to pick the right restaurants and you're not trying to have certain bodily, you know, functions happen in front of them. And, you know, you're
Yes.
crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's really specifically. I'm just saying that in the
I want you to
enthusiasm, you know.
I definitely have that. And I also want them to be happy. And I don't just mean be happy on a call with me. I mean, truly believe in what we're doing and see the value. If you don't see the value in what we're doing, you shouldn't be working with us. And I also have my own requirements. I don't want to work with people who don't think strategy matters or who don't think that knowing who you are and what your vision is matters. If you don't think that, you're just going to be messy for me too. That we're gonna spin around for a little while. You're gonna tell me what you want us to do. We're gonna do it because we can, and then it's not gonna have the impact you wanted us to, and you're gonna not have the patience to wait. I've done that dance more times than the other one.
I've done that dance too.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't like that.
Out of that.
I don't like that one. That one feels bad to me.
Yeah.
That one, and so and that was a hard decision, by the way. I think that when you think about things that are decision points and inflection points, I decided about a year ago that I wasn't going to do that kind of business anymore. And so I've actually turned people away. And if you would have asked me 4 years ago if I would turn anybody away, oh my God, I would have been like, nobody. I'll figure out how to do anything.
Same.
But now I want to do things that actually build businesses and make an impact. And a lot of the clients that I work with, I have long relationships with. You know, like they leave and they go somewhere else and we go too. And that is amazing.
It's so interesting. The timelines are so in parallel. Like I just hit my 8th year in the last year. Like I really resonate with what you just said because I've been thinking this term over and over again, deep, not wide, deep, not wide, right? So like whoever I work with, whoever comes on a retreat, does coaching with me, like I want it to be a full on fuck yes. Like I want them to be so stoked to work with me. I want to know that I can help and support them. And yeah, 4 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to say no to people. I don't think I would have had the guts. I don't think I would have, I wasn't in the right frame of mind or like the right chapter of that journey to be able to say that. But there's so much power in the no. And I think if we want to take this broad scope spiritual universe, it's like when you do send a clear message out of like who you're not willing to work with, the space, the void opens, right, to be filled with somebody that you do. And that could sound a little woo-woo if you're listening to this, but it's happened to me enough times that again, kind of going back to the proof thing, like I've seen it. I've seen that movie too many times, you know, and every time I doubt like, oh, should I say no? But like, you know, it's like not the person for you. And then you get the person, you're like, oh, yeah.
And it's brutal. It's brutal. It sucks the life out of you.
It's not fun. I've had cranky campers on retreats that I was like, goodness gracious, you know, just like this is, I mean, there was like, I'll tell the story without naming names, but I was on a retreat in a far off place and we would have to take taxis. Like we would take these vans like to go places. And it was so funny because there was, I call it a turd in the punch bowl. There was one turd in the punch bowl and you would notice that every time we were going to the vans, like people were sort of looking and positioning to sort of see where that person or people would be, right? To make sure that they were like, and I mean, that's the level of infectiousness that this was starting to create. And in my mind, I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, whatever the profits were from these people being on this trip, like it's literally not worth it because now it's affecting everybody. It's affecting me. There's a heaviness. There's a, so I've been there.
That's really interesting that you say that because I think about that because I have not a giant team, but I've got like 10 to 15 people at any given time on my staff. And when they don't like working with someone, it shows. And it's not if they don't like someone, it's if the business is hard like that, where you're getting a lot of negativity or a lot of pushback in a way that isn't productive and not collaborative. Everybody feels it and it starts to show. And I also don't want to do that to my team. Like I want my team to be excited to go to client meetings. And that means that we need to keep our clients excited to come to our meetings, right? Because if a client shows up because they have to, and they're pissed and they're like, God, why are you wasting my time? Something's not right. It's either we're not doing something right or we're not aligned. Generally, it's an alignment issue and it's not. And so making a little money on something that sucks the life out of you doesn't seem worth it to me anymore.
Yeah, that juice is not worth the squeeze. It's crazy. Like I was having a conversation. I played early pickleball this morning, and I played with 3 guys that were just awesome. Like they weren't like, they were pretty close to actually the best players that I've played with. They were like highly skilled, but they were just fun, like positive people. And I noticed, like, because I'm a mid-level player, like I was probably the weakest of anybody there, but I played up because the energy was so good. But then I've gone to events where like people are just like a bummer and they're not even as skilled, but it just like, I feel it drag me down. I start hitting the ball in the net. I start like not really caring, and I'm not like, my footwork's not good. And so, yeah, I mean, I do this process with people. I call it an energy investment strategy. And we kind of audit, like, where's all the places and people and things that you give energy to, right?
Yeah.
And like, we look for the siphons. We look for the places where it's leaking, you know, because it's like, you have to take your energy more seriously than money, than anything else. Like, it is like your most important resource, period, end of sentence. So I think the discerning part is hard, especially for new founders. You see it with people with relationships, dating, whatever. It's like when they're feeling that energy of desperation and like they need someone, something to fill the void, it's a very difficult place, because now they just start taking on all these people, all this energy and stuff. And then that discernment is wavering. They stop trusting themselves as much. And now they're trading time for money, or they're, you know, going on dates that they don't like, or whatever, you know, scenario they're in where that energy is just siphoning. So yeah, I love that for you. I love that for me. Let's celebrate that together. Woo, being discerning, getting to say no. Like, that's like a fun thing.
Energy of desperation, man. That is bad. And
Cologne, man.
Also, everyone knows it when you have it. Everyone knows it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there is like a power when you get on a call. Like I tell people, I don't have sales calls for retreats or coaching. I have like exploration with people. I'm like, hey, where are you at? What do you need? What's your challenges? And then like, I feel into that. Like, am I able or equipped or even excited to help you with it? And if it's a yes, then like, hey, let's explore that and talk about that and see. And if it's not, like, some of those calls end after just a couple of minutes. I'm like, hey, cool. Here's a couple of resources. Here's ways that you could go. And, you know, like, God bless, you know, good luck, you know, kind of thing. And that's a much more, I think, potent place to approach business and even just life from. I think that's life advice, you know?
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I would love to close out by just asking you if there's like maybe one piece of advice or just one message for a founder, or maybe even just could be for somebody in transition. Like, what is something that you'd like to leave with people that was really important, really impactful for you on your journey, that somebody listening to this might just get a little something out of?
I guess it's funny that I'm going to say this, because I remember my CEO saying this to me all the time that we worked together, and me just being like, oh, I can't believe he's saying that again. I don't want to hear that again. But I told you the story about myself looking for evidence that things were actually good and not bad. And so this notion of this too shall pass, for me, is the best advice I've ever gotten, and I didn't even know I got at the time. It was, if you just sit back for 2 seconds and let the situation breathe, you are going to find the way through it or around it, or you're going to find that you don't want to do it, right? Like, when I think about myself now and I struggle with something, I think about what I would tell. I try to separate myself from the situation and think about what advice I would give to someone else, another founder. And generally speaking, that advice is the same advice that someone else would give me in a business situation, right? You know the answers. I think that's the thing. You know the answers. You just need to give yourself a space to find them and tell them to yourself, and then believe them, right? Believe the evidence in front of you. Don't believe what your brain is necessarily telling you or what the world is telling you. The world's trying to take people down. The world is negative in general right now. And I think if you don't protect your energy and your positivity with what you already know to be true, then it's dangerous.
I want to push back on you on that. I really have been trying to advocate for this in people. I don't think the world is overly negative right now. I think it's what gets the most attention. And I come from a news background, but there are people every day rescuing dogs, helping underprivileged people. Like jumping on you or like trying to make this. I want to rally us all positive people together. Like,
I don't mean the news. I mean, in general, there are plenty of people that don't like to see other people be successful, because that's not our nature, is to tell you what's wrong. There are many pessimists in the world, or realists, or what we could call them, so many things, positive and negative things. But there's so many people that will tell you what you want to hear, reinforce your negative beliefs, reinforce that maybe you don't have it in you, maybe you should do something else. But I would say, think about what you really want and think about what you already know. Like if you're a founder, you already know something, you already made a choice, and just let yourself sit with it for a minute. Like I just think that jumping to, oh my God, this isn't going to work, which is what our human brains know how to do best. That's not that. If you just give it a minute and you just look for some other evidence, I can almost guarantee you that most of the time you're going to feel pretty darn good about what you're doing.
No, I love that. That phrase, "this too shall pass," I've been saying it to myself. I've been saying it to other people. It's been coming up so much recently because it's easy, right? It's easy to get caught with the beauty of our brain's ability to think forward. It's also one of the most debilitating things we experience, right? Because it wants to problem solve and it wants to know the outcomes, right? And so it's again, a beautiful function and ability that it has, but it's also such a thief of the present and a thief of joy. And so I think that's amazing advice. I think there's definitely, for sure, a contingent of people that want to buy into the hype that everything is doomsday and like worst case scenario, et cetera. It is our default mechanism. I'm not hating on that. I just want to accentuate that there are people like you, right, who've done the work to really find the good, to put good out in the world, and to really want to help and support people, businesses, and doing it from a heart-centered place. And that's a huge reason that I started this podcast, was I wanted to amplify those voices. I wanted people to know, hey, like there's people that have built businesses, but they've built them with integrity. They've been able to marry their passion, their purpose, and their profit. Like they've been able to do this in a way that is really beautiful and really meaningful. And if we all continue to do that for each other, right? Like we allow our work and our support to crescendo and to push and to elevate, right? The rising tide lifts all boats kind of things. If we can continue to do that, there is so much power in community and to being able to have conversations like this.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this so much. Your story is amazing. It's such a unique story of, being in a business, taking it over and running with it through many trials and tribulations. Is there anything that you want people to know about how they can find you, or like what's the best way? I know you said your podcast, but let's get the name of that out there again.
Yeah, the podcast is called The Irresistible Factor, and obviously it's on all the platforms, but Spotify and Apple are easy. I think that is probably the best way to start interacting, because you'll know exactly who I am, exactly who I serve when you listen to one or two episodes. And then you can reach me at kbridges@sawtoothgroup.com, which is my email, or on LinkedIn, any of those places. It's easy to find me. The podcast is probably the best way to get to know me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's Sawtooth Group. If you guys are listening, if you want marketing help and support, a lot of founders, I'm sure, are listening to this podcast. So I will say I've done over 6 figures and spend on advertising and marketing that did butt kiss. And it's really important to find people like you who care at that early stage and who want to incubate and help not just businesses grow, but people grow. And that's what I've finally found kind of in my business too, as somebody to really help and support my vision, my values, and then take it sort of next level. So thank you again, Kristi, so much for jumping on. This was so fun. What a good convo.
It was a good convo. You're very, very good at getting things out of people. I had no idea what I was going to tell you when I started, and I told you everything.
Well, once upon a time, I thought my 4 years of journalism school were kind of wasted when I became a yogi and I started traveling. And I was like, why did I waste all that time? I could have been meditating that whole time, but no energy, no effort is ever created or wasted, right? So it's like, yeah, it comes in handy, and I love getting to exercise that a little bit here. It's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Bye, everybody.